Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a genuinely provocative essay by a writer named Zhu Feng. It maps out a really radical and, let's be honest, pretty controversial trajectory for human society. We're going to impartially unpack how the author weaves together history, technology, and geopolitics to predict an entirely new global order. So, let's just dive right in to how he arrives at this striking vision of tomorrow. To kick things off, let's look at the huge question the author throws at us right at the very beginning. What actually drives human progress? Is it our morality, or is it our technology? Now, we usually credit great philosophers and religious leaders with shaping civilization, right? Well, this essay completely upends that assumption. To navigate all this, we'll follow the author's roadmap. First, we'll look at technology over morality. Second, the impact of systems. Third, 8 bold predictions. Fourth, the climate catalyst. And finally, we'll wrap up with the Life Chanyan vision.
All right, part 1, technology over morality, the true driver of change.
The essay sets up a really stark contrast here. On one side, you have traditional moral preachings, things like Christianity, Buddhism, Confucianism, Maoism. The author argues that despite centuries of all this moral instruction, everyday human survival really didn't change drastically. In fact, he claims heavy emphasis on dogma sometimes even correlates with worse living conditions. But on the flip side, you have scientific revolutions, steam, electricity, AI. The essay argues that these technologies actually force human behavior to evolve in ways that philosophy simply cannot. Just think about the progression for a second. In the 1860s, steam engines totally revolutionized travel. A decade later, electrification literally banished the dark. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, and microprocessors introduced entirely new modes of thinking. And today, AI and instant communication are reshaping literally everything we do. The author's crucial point here is that adopting these technologies isn't about our moral willingness. I mean, if you have a smartphone, you aren't mailing a letter just to say hello. The evolution of our lifestyle is driven by absolute practical necessity. Moving right along to part 2. The impact of systems, free versus closed societies. So the author posits this very rigid binary worldview when it comes to governance. He argues that open, free systems breed vitality. When people are actually free to innovate, productivity naturally soars and living conditions improve. But in stark contrast, he says closed, conservative systems make a society lifeless. Restricting freedom inherently hinders productivity, crushes people's overall happiness, and locks entire populations into stagnant thinking. To back this up, the essay points to direct historical contrasts. Take the United States, with 200 years of continuous economic growth, which the author attributes entirely to its open system. Then compare that to Iran. The essay argues that the 1980 Ayatollah takeover turned what was a splendid civilization into an autocracy in serious decline. Or look at Zimbabwe, which used to be the granary of southern Africa, until conservative rule under Mugabe led to a devastating currency collapse. But honestly, the most staggering data point the essay brings up is this number, 4 million. Placing heavy emphasis on Venezuela as a modern warning, the text notes that after a 2013 autocratic takeover, a wealthy country of 32 million people shockingly generated 4 million refugees. The author views this not just as a standard political failing, but as absolute, undeniable proof that closed systems inevitably collapse under the weight of their own restrictions. That brings us to part 3. 8 bold predictions, a radical future map. Here is where it gets wild. The author accelerates these historical trends into some truly explosive prophecies. First off, he claims unstoppable mobile internet is going to bypass firewalls, inevitably collapsing autocratic regimes. Following that, a universal market economy will become the only global standard, which will allow for the totally free global movement of people. And as borders open up, traditional religions and nationalist sentiments are going to fade away, merging into a largely American-style cultural framework. Ultimately, he says, this all culminates in the emergence of a unified global government. But prediction number 7 is where things take a really radical turn. The author explicitly predicts that marriage, which the essay rather shockingly labels as an ignorant phenomenon, is going to gradually disappear entirely, and is going to take the traditional nuclear family right down with it. The argument here is that the small, isolated family unit is simply incompatible with the fluid, open future he's describing. So you might be wondering, if the nuclear family is gone, what on earth replaces it? Well, the essay envisions a reliance on something called folk collective production. This is a social mode where people rely emotionally and practically on communal living. The author actually cites Japan's Konohana family as a real-world blueprint for this. So instead of isolated households, your resources, daily labor, and emotional support are all shared across a wide collective group.
Which leads us to part 4, the climate catalyst, the explosive trigger.
Now, the author admits that tech and politics alone are not going to force a borderless world. There has to be a catalyst, and that trigger, an inescapable barrage of extreme climate disasters. We're talking fires, floods, plagues, and droughts. The essay claims these disasters will act as an objective law of nature, causing such severe societal disruption that our current political systems will simply break. So humanity isn't going to unite because we suddenly become highly moral. We are going to be aggressively forced to unite simply to survive the wrath of the planet.
And finally, part 5, the Life Chen Yuan vision, the ultimate destination.
Following these massive environmental and systemic shocks, the essay concludes that nations as we currently know them will simply vanish. In their place rises what he calls the Life Chen Yuan era. In this predicted future, the whole world unifies under a single collective consciousness, a new oasis for life, which resembles those large-scale communal living structures we were just talking about, will blossom across the entire globe.
The author provocatively encapsulates this whole borderless, post-nationalist mindset with one really striking phrase. Where there is bread, there is motherland. The core argument is that basic human needs and practical survival will ultimately override all of our traditional geographic loyalties. We won't belong to a patch of dirt surrounded by imaginary lines anymore. We will belong wherever humanity can collectively sustain itself. And that is the author's immense, highly radical map for tomorrow. He ties the microchip in your pocket to the melting of the ice caps and the eventual dissolution of our borders. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. Looking at the momentum of our world today, the rapid rise of AI, shifting global politics, and our changing climate, how much of this evolution is already underway? Is this radical prophecy actually possible? Think about it and keep learning. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.